Regardless of culture, religion, and race, all human beings have one common feature: humanity. When we are born into this world, we are barely affected by our socio-economic advantage and different personal contexts, with the same qualities existing across all human beings. We can all think, we are all mostly conscious, and we all have a sense of right and wrong. This concept is called universality, and in this video, we are going to look at this idea, its origins, and what it means in philosophy. All videos on this channel are properly researched by academic journals and books, and without further ado, you're watching All Things Humanities. As we like to do on this channel, let's understand and define what universality is. It is the idea that certain principles, concepts, or truths are universally applicable to all individuals, regardless of their cultural, historical, or personal context. The way to think about universality is to imagine yourself irrespective of your culture and your upbringing. Universality is a diverse concept, and it is often explained in the context of moral philosophy. This is where one makes claims about particular acts or events in the world and determine whether they are moral or not. An example of a universal moral principle is murder. Regardless of what you believe, the act of murdering one person and taking their life is wrong, regardless of the culture that you live in. This is because murder is a violation of our conscience, and the conscience is evident in all human beings throughout human history. The idea that certain moral principles are universal shows that universality refutes the idea of moral relativism, the idea that right and wrong do not exist. This is because morality is objective, and because the same moral principles are evident in all cultures, with humanity being the common ground. Universality was popular in the philosophy of Immanuel Kant, who was a German and Enlightenment philosopher who believed that certain principles, which he called categorical imperatives, are universally true and binding on all rational beings, regardless of where they were in the world. For this reason, he believed that there was a moral law that all human beings could not escape, and for this reason, we had a duty to respect the dignity and autonomy of all human beings. This, in essence, would stop humans from using each other as mere tools of our own purposes. Immanuel Kant believed that moral principles are grounded in the concept of universal reason, meaning that they apply to all individuals regardless of their context. Universalism or universality is a form of moral absolutism, which is the belief that there are absolute standards against which moral questions can be judged, and that actions are right or wrong regardless of the context of the act. Kant's universal moral theory emphasizes that moral obligations are absolute and unconditional, arguing that one should always tell the truth, even if the consequences of doing so are terrible. This idea is prevalent in the work of Jordan Peterson and is also profound in Christian doctrine. For example, if a murderer was to come to your doorstep looking to kill people that you were hiding in your house, in the eyes of Immanuel Kant, lying to the murderer would be wrong, even if it might seem like the right thing to do. Other than ethics and moral philosophy, universality has been explored and discussed in other branches of philosophy, including epistemology and metaphysics. In metaphysics, the concept of universality is used to describe the idea that certain truths or claims of knowledge are universally applicable, regardless of time and place. For example, the laws of physics are considered to be universal in nature, meaning that they apply to all physical objects, regardless of their location or context. In other words, the laws of gravity apply regardless of which country you perform an experiment in. The scientific method in Australia would not change if it was done in another country. This is what Kant and universalists were getting at. The same can be said for mathematics, which are considered to be universally applicable and true, independent of any particular culture or historical context. For example, 1 + 1 = 2, regardless of where you are in the world. Epistemology, the branch of philosophy concerned with knowledge, also explores the concept of universality. The belief is that certain knowledge claims are universally applicable and that they are not limited by individual perspectives or cultural backgrounds. For example, the concept of cause and effect is considered to be universally applicable, meaning that it applies to all physical systems regardless of their own specific context. If an apple falls down on the head of Isaac Newton like it did, the same experience is possible across all cultures and across all people. In the religious context, Christianity is often understood as a universal religious tradition because its morals transcend time and culture and apply to all people. Additionally, Christianity asserts that its system of morality was set by a deity, meaning God, and therefore it was absolute, universal, perfect, and unchangeable. Even Hinduism and Buddhism claim to be universal traditions, arguing that their practices and philosophies are still true regardless of your beliefs, context, and upbringing. In Hinduism, yoga is a key practice that is mentioned in the Mahabharata, and it defines the purpose of yoga as uniting the individual self with the universal reality. However, universality does not come without its criticisms. A common criticism of universality is cultural or moral relativism, which asserts that moral principles and values are not universal, but rather they are relative to a particular culture or society. This means that what is considered morally right or wrong in one culture may not be the same in another. A good example of this is when the Aztecs, a pre-Columbian civilization, were happy and cheering when a member of their population was lifted on top of the temple maya and their heart was ripped out and sacrificed to the god of the sun. In the eyes of the moral relativists, this act isn't wrong, but instead it is acceptable to that group or culture because it is their own practice. Another criticism of universality is ethnocentrism, which argues that universality is often used to justify the dominance of one culture or society over another. This means that the values and principles of one culture are presented as superior to those of another, claiming that theirs aligns with universal principles. Once again, this can be seen in how the Spanish colonized Central and South America, believing that their culture and way of life was superior to the pre-Columbian Central Americans. The last major criticism of universality is the historical contingency argument. This principle suggests that values are not universal, but rather they are contingent on historical circumstances. This means that the principles and values that hold true in one period of history may not be true in another. Critics argue that the idea of universality ignores the historical context in which values and principles are developed. For example, it used to be common for homosexuals to be persecuted. Persecutions against homosexuality rose during the High Middle Ages, reaching their height during the medieval Inquisitions when the Cathars were accused of fornication and sodomy alongside being accused of Satanism. The point here is that understandings of homosexual phenomena have changed over time, and claiming that a particular idea is universal is difficult to do so. This is because as science and our understanding of the physical world changes, it generally changes our ethics and morality too. Overall, universality is a concept in philosophy that has been discussed and debated in many branches, including ethics, metaphysics, and epistemology. The belief is that certain principles, concepts, or truths are universally applicable regardless of an individual's cultural or personal context. This is important to remember because it provides a basis for moral and ethical values, scientific and mathematical knowledge, and a framework for understanding the world and our place within it. The concept of universality is often contrasted with particularity, which refers to the idea that certain principles or concepts only apply in specific contexts or to specific individuals or groups. But that brings us to the end of this video on universality. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, consider subscribing and liking the video for more content like this.